Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are live on March 21st. My name is Alyssa Atkins, and I am the Training and Development Coordinator at the Native Learning Center. We are thrilled you could join us today. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. Before we get started, I wanted to familiarize you with some of the features available and how the environment works. If you look at the top of your screen, you will see an icon of either a person with their hand raised or just a hand. With that icon, you can either raise hand, agree, disagree, or step away. Now your screen should look similar to this graphic here. To the bottom left, you will see a box that says Files. Here you will find today's presentation. Please feel free to download a copy for yourself. Simply click the item you would like to download, then click the arrow pointing downwards and you will be prompted to save or print the materials based on your device's permissions. The second box that states Web Links To houses today's survey as well as any other links that are found throughout the presentation. Lastly, to the right of the screen, we have a chat box available. This is how you will communicate to the instructor and NLC staff, which is me. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to interact by using the chat box. Simply type your message and hit enter or click that up arrow icon button to submit. We encourage class participation, so please feel free to write in those questions or comments. Tech support issues should also be submitted here. And with that being said, it is a great pleasure that I introduce Lynn Wilson and Mark Thomas.
Thank you so much, Wista. Appreciate it and glad to be here. So today we are going to talk about e-commerce. And, maybe a lot of people think, oh, well, e-commerce has been around for so long that I know everything about it, but e-commerce can actually be kind of, not necessarily complicated, but there's probably more to e-commerce than everybody is aware of. So I'm looking forward to sharing some information with all of you today. My name is Lynn Wilson. Okay, here we go. My name is Lynn Wilson. I am the Micro Enterprise Development Specialist for Indian Dispute Resolution Services. We are a nonprofit organization, and my role is primarily in regards to our small business development services, which it's our program we call it the Acorn Project. And through the Acorn Project, we provide training and technical assistance to Native entrepreneurs all over the United States, although we do primarily most of our work in California, Nevada, and Oklahoma. And I have with me today our Executive Director, Mark Thompson. Mark, do you want to jump on and say hi?
Hi, hello, everybody. I'm Mark Thompson. I'm the Executive Director, and welcome today. We look forward to being with you.
Yeah, and I'm glad to have Mark on with me today to help do some presenting because Mark is pretty darn smart when it comes to e-commerce. So let's go ahead and just dive into the presentation. So really what we want to make sure that you learn today is understanding, the different methods of selling online. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of selling within different platforms. And we'll also talk, if we have time, we'll talk about some tips for, finding ways to attract customers to your online store, getting those orders fulfilled, and managing your finances. So e-commerce is a really fancy term, but really all it means, it's just the activity of electronically buying or selling products and services over the internet. And I think by now, probably most of us, have engaged in e-commerce, in some way. The great thing about e-commerce, I feel, especially in Indian countries, it's really opened a lot of doors for people to be able to start their own businesses, especially those of us who might live in really rural areas. I know I live in northeastern Oklahoma in a rural location, And if it wasn't for e-commerce, I would not be able to have my side hustle business because I'm located in an area where it really doesn't, I wouldn't have very good, I guess, traction and sales if I had to rely on, a brick and mortar store. So that's why I love being able to use e-commerce. Another great thing about that is, sometimes there, maybe some of you that live in really super remote locations where shipping is not done very easily. Maybe it's a long way to the post office, or if you're in some areas of Alaska or even in Hawaii, the cost of shipping and everything can be really high. So we're going to talk about some great business models that some of you may be interested if that's a challenge that you face. And I just want to share this really fun fact that the first e-commerce sale was just 28 years ago. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's really crazy, because that's when my son was born. And it just goes to show you, like, I'm so entrenched in e-commerce, not only as a seller, but as a buyer. And just to think that something like e-commerce I just couldn't imagine my life without it. Yet for most of my adult life, up until 28 years ago, I did. So that's just an interesting point. So let's talk about different places that you can sell online. Give me just a second here. Okay, so really there's two things that you need to know about selling online. In other words, I would say primary ways. You can either create your own store by building your own website, which a lot of people do, and that's great. Or you can utilize online marketplaces. And essentially an online marketplace it means that you're kind of using someone else's platform or someone else's store. And I always like to think of it like this, maybe you have a consignment booth at an antique store, or if you're a hairdresser, you might rent, a chair booth space within an existing salon. So that's how I kind of think about these third-party marketplace platforms. And as we continue through the webinar, we're going to, share some very specific examples of each and talk more in depth about the pros and cons of each of those. Okay, so there's a few different e-commerce business models, and some e-commerce business models are really easy to get into. Some of them don't require, very much startup capital, some, in fact, even zero. While there are others that can really require a huge investment of both your time and your money up front, but may give you some different advantages on down the line. And some of these models are compatible with each other, and you can use different different models simultaneously. So for instance, we have a native artist that we work with a lot. Her name's Mary Beth Timothy, and she and her husband have a business called Moonhawk Art. And Mary Beth and her husband, they have their own website. And in addition to their own website, they also utilize Etsy, which is a marketplace platform. And then on top of that, they also utilize another business model known as drop shipping. So they do have some items that when customers order those items, Mary Beth and her husband are not necessarily the one that fills the order and ships it out. It's a different company that does that. But, like products that she sells in her Etsy store, if you go into her Etsy store, those are products that she's going to have on hand at home and ship out herself. So there's several different ways that you can do it, and you don't have to just pick one way. You can choose a multitude of different channels to do this. So one of the first ones that we're going to talk about is drop shipping. And most of us have received drop ship products, but we just didn't realize it. And that's because drop shipping is really kind of invisible to the consumer. And so therefore, a lot of us really aren't familiar with this type of e-commerce model. So when you start a business using the drop shipping model, you really don't have you don't have any inventory. You have an online store and you accept orders, but you don't do any of the fulfillment. So you're not shipping the products to the customers. And this is, again, really a great option for someone if you live in a remote area where it's difficult or expensive to ship products, then you can look into doing a drop shipping type business. So this diagram explains how it works. Whenever you use the drop shipping model, you have a store, an online store. A customer comes there, they buy something from you, and then you pass that order along to a supplier, and that supplier, is often a manufacturer. And then the supplier fills the order and ships it to the customer. So while this can be a really good model, for some who have shipping challenges, some people use this business model not because of the shipping concerns, but because they only want to concentrate on making the product and not on marketing and selling it to the direct consumer. And so that's kind of how the reason why some companies use drop shipping. So I'll give you kind of an example here too. You might have a store, you've created an online store and you sell leather jackets that are made by a manufacturer. So when a customer orders the jacket from you, they pay you $100. And then in turn, you pay the supplier. I have in this slide 70, but I may say 75 in the next slide. But anyway, you pay the wholesaler $70. So what that means is that you're getting to keep that $30. So it's not a super high profit margin, but that's just how drop shipping works. So let's talk about the pros and cons to drop shipping. Drop shipping is easy to set up, requires little investment. Like I said, the costs are really low, especially when you compare it to other types of retail models, because you don't need a warehouse. You don't need a warehouse to store products. You don't need a team of employees to help you. You also don't have to worry about stocking or shipping. It's really kind of surprisingly hands-off, especially once you get going. And all of this means that you can get your business started today. So you can actually get online and start a drop shipping store within a matter of hours. Drop shipping is also very easy to scale. As you scale up, your business model doesn't really have to change much at all. You'll have to put a little bit more work into sales and marketing as you go, as your business grows, but your day-to-day is going to stay really more or less the same, aside from the fact that you're going to be processing more orders. And that, to me, is one of the great benefits of drop shipping, because since there's no infrastructure, no warehouse or inventory that you're having to keep, the cost doesn't skyrocket whenever you upscale your business. And therefore, you're left more time and money to allocate to the marketing side of the business. Drop shipping is really also very flexible. A lot of people do this that work from home, and really you don't need anything more than a laptop. And great thing about this is that, you can work at the times that are convenient for you. So this is really ideal for those of you who may have a full-time job or other commitments. This is a type of business that you can just do as a side hustle on your own time as you want to. And again, if you live in a remote location where shipping isn't easy, it's just another great benefit. There are some cons to drop shipping, so let me talk about those for a second. Slim profit margins. As I mentioned a minute ago in the previous slide, if someone's buying a jacket from you for $100, and then you're having to give that supplier, $75, that means your profit margin is only 25%. So, profit margins do tend to be higher when you're like creating an item or something yourself and selling direct to the consumer. But this way you do have that middleman in there. So again, it's got it pros to it, but a con is going to be smaller profit margins. It can also be kind of complicated when it comes to the ordering process. The customer orders, you process it by passing it on to the supplier, and then your supplier fulfills the order and ships it to the customer. And that really sounds very simple. And where it can really get complicated is if you're sourcing products from multiple suppliers. Then you might run into some problems. So, for example, each of your suppliers might use a different shipping solution. And that can really present a problem for you and your customers, because depending on the shipping that different suppliers you use may have, sometimes the cost can be prohibitive, especially if you're trying to ship multiple products to one customer. Different suppliers are also going to have different structures in place for processing and billing. And since you have to manage the interaction with your suppliers, this can sometimes get a little bit tricky. And finally, another con to doing this model is customer service, because sometimes orders are going to go wrong. Maybe an order doesn't go out on time. Maybe a product arrives damaged. And because you're just the store owner and you're not actually in control of shipping the item to the customer, you don't have a lot of control when stuff like that happens. Unfortunately, the customer, of course, is looking at you, because they see you as the person, like, I bought this from you and there's an issue with it and you need to solve the problem. So you have to deal with those customer complaints. Yet you don't have a whole lot of control if there are issues with the supplier in regards to getting the item shipped out. So that's just something that you have to keep in mind. And I would say that if you are going to do something like drop shipping, like I mentioned, Mary Beth, I know that she had to check a few different companies out, and you might even kind of test them, like order some products and see, how everything goes, so you can avoid, maybe those companies that don't do very well. I think maybe I got ahead on a slide here, but that's okay. So we're going to talk about another model, which is reselling. And the first thing that really distinguishes between a reseller and a drop shipper is all in how it works, because resellers are pretty much the same as any conventional seller, which means that they have to purchase goods from a supplier, stock it, so they actually have to keep an inventory, and then they are in charge of the fulfillment process. So they have to package it and ship it to the customer. There is a lot more capital requirement whenever you're choosing a reselling business, because you do typically have to buy large quantities of items up front, and then you have to have a place to store those. So you're going to have some warehousing cost. And while on the other hand, like if you're doing drop shipping, then you don't have to purchase all that inventory ahead of time, and you don't have to keep that inventory in stock. Really, all you're doing is paying or spending your time and your money on trying to market that product and reach new customers. Actually, I want to go back here a second, because I'm sorry, I wanted to kind of cover some of the risk. The risk of a drop shipper does tend to be smaller than that of a reseller. And one of those most common risks, of course, is that no customer is going to be interested in the product you offer. So in other words, the cost that you've spent on advertising and marketing may not get any results. And resellers have really almost that same risk, but at a greater level, because not only, if you're a drop seller and there's no interest in what you're trying to sell, really all you're out is the money that you've spent to market. But if you're a reseller and if no one's interested in your product, then you've got a bigger problem, because not only have you spent your time marketing, but you've also had to buy a lot of those products in bulk, and you've had to store them. So there's a lot more risk involved money wise whenever you're doing reselling. Okay, now let's talk a minute about private labeling. And I don't have a lot to say on this, but I am starting to see that more people are doing private labeling. And the products that you're seeing on the screen now are actually products that a native salon in California has. She's one of our clients, and she has her own hair care line. And so what happens in private labeling is really what you're doing is you're having someone else create a product for you. And then all you're doing is putting your branding on that product and then selling it to the consumer. So the company that makes her hair care products, they're probably making the same exact product for a number of other salons, but they're just putting different labels on it. And so that is definitely something that you can do. And I think it's a great way to increase your brand recognition. I will say that, one of the things about doing a private label brand like this is that it's going to be a little bit harder for you to build that brand trust with customers. So in this instance, she sells a lot of hair care products to the customers that actually come to her salon for hair care services because they know her and they trust her. But whenever you're doing a private label brand like this, if you're trying to reach a much broader audience, then it may be a little bit more difficult, because you're going to be competing with a lot of other different brands, even though it may be the same exact product. Just having your own branding on there is going, people don't realize it's the same product. It's just going to be branded differently. But that's another option that you can choose. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Mark so we can dive a little bit deeper into some more specific platforms, especially the marketplace platforms that we mentioned. So Mark, please.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much, Lynn. One thing I did want to add right here before we jump into the platforms. Well, first I want to apologize. Some of our fonts that we're about to see, I just realized that I should have put in some more traditional fonts because some of my fonts are going to conflict with my photos or my images. So I first apologize about that. But I also wanted to mention, we're talking a lot about selling here. But don't neglect what e-commerce can also do for your business for buying. And, if you need to, bring things into like a store, if you need things that are produced for you, like you need to manufacture. And so what I'm thinking about is, there's e-commerce platforms like Alibaba, right? That's a Chinese manufacturer. And then they have something that allows you to buy in much smaller quantities called AliExpress. And I want folks to realize that e-commerce can work both ways. There may be times that you need to buy things for your business, and don't neglect what e-commerce can do for you on that end as well. Okay, so let's get started a little bit. So let's first talk a little bit about what the different types of e-commerce platforms are, and what we're going to do here. We're going to go into some of these a little bit more in just a minute. But what I want to do is kind of give a broad overview, for the for each of these different groups. So we mentioned social media, and of course, you guys are all familiar with these social media platforms. But people are using social media to sell online, and so we just have a few here. The big logos of Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, but there's many platforms that are out there, and we'll go in to some social media platforms in just a minute. And even within these platforms, you have things like forums and groups, right? And so like Facebook has a lot of forums that you can go in and sell. And we'll talk about how somebody is using Facebook groups to be able to sell. Then you have marketplaces. Lynn just mentioned that there was two kind of big types of e-commerce platforms, and one of the two platforms she mentioned were marketplaces. And so I just kind of coined my own term here, and I call it marketplaces light. And so it's not the traditional setting up your own store, how we have with Etsy, but it's something where you're going online and it's a marketplace, but they tend to be one-off items, and that's things like Craigslist and then of course with Craigslist. I left it in the presentation so people could kind of understand, kind of what it is. But Craigslist has really been surpassed by Facebook Marketplace, and that's where a lot of that kind of one-off selling is taking place. And then you have the more traditional marketplaces we think of. Of course, the granddaddy is eBay, has been there for a long time, and then you have specialty ones like Etsy. You have Amazon, which is running their Amazon marketplace, which allows you to sell all kinds of things. And of course, Amazon is the largest e-commerce platform. And there are just tons of these and tons that are popping up all the time. So even like Handmade, which is a subset of Amazon, that is being able to be sold on the platform, being able to be sold on the Amazon platform and use their software, but it's kind of a subset of Amazon. Then you have things that are your own type of shopping cart and an own store, and those are things like Shopify, where they give you the software, and I should say, so two different distinctions here where you're running your own store. So you have the hosted, and those are things where you're building it on usually a website platform, right? Shopify, when you create a Shopify store, you're not having to install software on your own server. You're using Shopify's software, but you're doing it on their platform. And a lot of the website builders are like this as well. So you have Wix, Squarespace, GoDaddy. They're all running their own, where you're building a website, but then you also have the ability to also create an e-commerce store. You have companies like BigCommerce and Big Cartel. Those are competitors to Shopify, but something like Big Cartel is something that would be like that's a kind of a niche, store software, and Big Cartel specializes in artists. And so you can see that even within these store platforms, there's even different niches that you can go to that may be for whatever reason. Could be price, could be they have the right kind of look for what you're building. And so we'll talk about some of these different platforms and kind of give you some things to look out for. And then the last here kind of big category would be self-hosted platforms. And of course, as we're moving up the list here, or moving down the list, I should say, on the page, we're getting more and more complicated. So you have something like WooCommerce, and WooCommerce is a huge platform, and they've been around for a long time. Same with Magento, but those are self-hosted platforms. So WooCommerce is an integration with WordPress, and WordPress is the largest website development platform, right? And many websites that are out there are built with WordPress, and so you can install a WooCommerce to work with your WordPress installation. But you can see, like, to do that, now you're having to maintain your WordPress installation, on a server or your own server, or you're renting a server, and you have to now maintain your WooCommerce installation. So really, for most people that are probably on this call, they probably don't want to deal with these, but I just wanted to let you know that these things are out there. So we're just mentioning kind of these broad groups, but there's a lot that we're not mentioning. There's, and there's new ones that are coming out. A newer one is Volusion. That's a competitor to Shopify. Then you have kind of these niche e-commerce platforms that many of you may have either bought things for, or you may be selling on. Like, you have things like Poshmark, Ruby Lane for things like fashion. Then you just have, like, really unique ones like Bonanza and Swappa. And Lynn was mentioning earlier, drop shipping. So you may have Teespring to do t-shirts or other types of printing. And I was even thinking, and just added this to the presentation, even digital products. And, even though you can use these platforms to sell digital products, there's often their own e-commerce platforms for digital products. So you have things like Teachable and Kajabi and Thinkific, and those are e-commerce platforms and help you deliver an online course. You have things like Gumroad, and Gumroad is a platform that helps you deliver, like, ebooks and things like that if you want to sell. And of course, like, if you're selling an ebook, right, you have Amazon and their whole Kindle ecosystem that they have built, where you can put it, you can do Kindle publishing, where they'll actually send you a physical book if you order that, or you can put it on Kindles. You can even sell it through their Kindle Unlimited platform. So if you want to sell online, there is a platform out there for you. As I just mentioned, they get more and more complicated, and I hesitate to even talk about some of these more complicated ones, because I think if we're artists on here, right, and we're going to a powwow to sell, we're going to a local craft fair, we got things in the casino store, we definitely don't want to learn to be a computer programmer, right? That's not our bag, right? We're artists, and we want to sell stuff. But I think, if we're going to get into the e-commerce game, and the benefit of being in e-commerce, right, which allows us to reach many customers, allows us to reach customers outside of our current geographic area. It allows us to not only reach customers outside our geographic area, but allows us to reach customers all over the world, right? Lynn just talked about one of the clients that we're working with in doing hair care products that's working on exporting, right? And the power that some of these e-commerce platforms allow us to do allows us to reach those customers when we would not otherwise be able to do it. So I'm going to challenge everybody that maybe we don't want to go all the way and build a gigantic business, but see where some of these platforms can fit within your business, and how you can and try to make and say, okay, I'm willing to learn that much because I think I can do that, and that's going to really help me sell a lot more at higher prices, right? And that's really what the benefit of e-commerce can do: help you sell more at higher prices, and ultimately brings more revenue into your business, no matter what you're selling. So I'm just going to kind of go through and kind of talk about some pros and cons, and some different things about each of these platforms. And some of these I'm going to go over a little bit quicker than others. But I just kind of wanted to go over some of the things that I that I think of when I'm looking at these different groups. And we would definitely welcome any questions you have. Please throw them in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to help. And one of the things that we always say is, that Len and I, we don't have all the answers, but together as a group, we're bringing this information, because you guys are all using this as well, right? You guys are all using social media platforms. You guys are using e-commerce platforms. You guys are purchasing. Some of you may be buying. You guys are all buying. Some of you guys may be selling. And so we want to hear your experiences as well. So just real quick, starting with social media, online forums, Facebook groups. These are really going to be really the easiest kind of entry point into e-commerce, right? And we're thinking about, if you make a post on Facebook, right? You can make a post on Facebook and be selling that way, right? You put your product up, who's interested? Somebody says, hey, they want it. All right, now you're doing e-commerce. So you do not have to go and build a store. You can be engaging in e-commerce very easily, right? And I just listed some other things there where you can get very, there's all kinds of different affinity groups. Tractor by Net. I just happened to put that up there because I was interested in buying a tractor, right? And you can go on Tractor, and people are selling things on their little their bulletin board, right? So these, and that's an online forum. So there's all kinds of different groups. So you make a post and you could sell it. A post can be live video, and one of the things about live video, this really came of age during the pandemic, right? Where you had people that they could not get together in person. All of, and Lynn mentioned Mary Beth. Mary Beth, she does a lot of in-person sales. She goes to a lot of large art markets like Cahokia and travels around a Red Earth, and so she's there. And of course, when the pandemic originally hit in 2020, all those were wiped off the map, right? And so you lost all of your places that you could sell in person. And so now she had an Etsy business already built, so she was able to continue. But how do you, increase that? How do you make that better? How do you reach your customers? How do you build a rapport with your customers? And video was a way that could be done. And with the platforms now and the increases in bandwidth, even through cell phones, right? Now we're doing a 5G, before we had 4G, but now, everybody's having 5G access, and you're having tremendous speed. So you don't even need to have a fiber connection in your home or cable internet. A lot of times with your cell phone, you're able to go on and broadcast. And I know a lot of people were doing Facebook Lives, where they would just go live on Facebook and they would just walk around their home and start talking about different things that they had made, and people could chat in the chat box and say, hey, that we want to buy that, right? So that was a real simple way. You did not have to have a lot of technical expertise. And another benefit was all that was for free, right? You already had your cell phone. You already had a Facebook account. There was no additional cost, right? So, and a lot of people are using this as well as we get into more video only platforms. So you're seeing a lot of this on TikTok, where people are selling on TikTok. And so video can be a great addition. And, just as you have a video only platforms, there's going to be e-commerce on those as well. So some of the pros and some of the cons, right? So like I just mentioned, no cost. You start it, you could start it very quickly. You're already familiar with it because you're probably already using these social media platforms. Now, one of the cons is potentially limited reach. I had somebody in one of my classes up at the Klamath Tribes in Oregon, and she was doing a crochet, different things, everything from caps. She would make little dolls that she would crochet. She was selling those on her Facebook page, right? So she would put a post out, and then, and the first person that says, and she'd write the price there on the first person that said, I want that, she would sell it, she would deliver it locally. The issue with that is that she is very limited based on the number of friends that she has. Most likely, nobody that is outside the friends that she has on Facebook would ever see those posts, right? So that's really one of the issues with social media. You essentially have to learn to be an influencer if you're going to make social media your platform, right? And no protections. That's more on the buyer side, right? Because if somebody sends you money and they never get any product, right? It's really a trust. And so, no integrations. We'll talk a little bit about what those integrations are with some of the larger platforms, but that could be things like integrating an accounting system like QuickBook, right? When you're selling online and using social media, everything's going to be very manual. It's going to be very, I'm not going to say low tech, that's not the right word for it, but it's going to be very simple in the way that the process is going to be sold. But you can get very creative with it, and you can move a lot of merchandise. So, a couple different examples are something like, here's somebody who was selling something in a group. This group just happens to be Native American Trading Post Arts and Crafts. It's a mouthful. That's a group. I think it has something like 31,000 members on Facebook. And so somebody's interested in the item. What they would do in this case, she posted up these earrings. I don't think she put a price on this one, but other people will put a price, and they just send her a private message. And then you can see that she comments when they're sold, right? Other people will put a price up there, and then it's whoever puts that they want it in the chat box first, and then they can take the transaction off. When I say off, I shouldn't say offline, out of the public, and they do it over private message. I've even seen a group where people are posting their item and doing a starting price, and it's actually an auction format, and people will, let's say it was these earrings, right? She would say, I'm going to start the bidding at $10, right? And then people come and put, our next person puts 15, and the next person puts 20. And then, there's a time limit set on when the auction will end. And when the auction ends, that person who has the highest bid in, they win the product. And so, you can even do a lot of the things that are happening on sites like eBay. You can do that on social media, right? It's manual, but it's possible to be done. Okay, so a couple of other examples we have here is, I wanted to bring this one up because this is Kamama beadwork. And one of the interesting things about Kamama beadwork, and I'm going to just put it here on the next page, is she was actually featured in the New York Times. That's actually how I learned about her. She's a Cherokee bead worker, bead artist, and she, so she got featured, and all she was doing here in her store is she was posting items, and then people were posting, hey, I want that, and then they would do a transaction. And she was selling things within minutes, right? She had built a pretty large following. You can see, she has 18,000 followers, and this was a year ago when I took this picture. And so she probably has a lot more followers now, right? And so that's one of the things, right? When you're doing this on social media, you want to build up your following. And you know what I'm going to do here, because you guys may not be able to see this. This is the artist is Taylor Gutierrez. I'm going to put, this is a link to her link tree, and I'm also going to put a link in the chat box to the story on the New York Times. One of the interesting,
Mark, I don't know if you know this, but she's also in my cohort.
Oh, she's in Lynn's cohort. So Lynn's going to talk all about a cohort here that she's done with Etsy. So that is awesome. Well, it's like the world comes full circle there. Okay, so so I posted a couple links there, but one of the interesting things about on the link tree, and so she may have moved to Etsy and is doing a lot on Etsy. But if you click on her link tree there, that actually takes you, and she has a GoDaddy store set up. So one of the things we just mentioned about having, stores in different locations, right? And the different ways you can have a store. She was selling on Etsy. She created a GoDaddy store, and GoDaddy is a website builder. And so there was a cart where she put up items and she could check out there. And as Lynn just mentioned, she's in this the Indigenous Makers cohort, which is run by an organization called Nest and Etsy. And so she's also creating a store and selling on Etsy as well on that marketplace. So she's doing a number of these different things, right? She's selling on social media. She's selling versus your own store store software using GoDaddy, and then she's selling via a marketplace and using Etsy. So you can see how you don't have to be constrained to just one, and you may want to start on one. She started on selling on Instagram, and then you can move up and move to other areas. Just one other thing before we move off of social media is that a lot of social media, they see what's going on the other platforms, right? They see what's going on Etsy. They see what's going on Amazon. And so what they're trying to do is they don't want to lose those sales. They want to see how they can generate additional revenue. And so a lot of the social media platforms are coming out with types of shopping cart or e-commerce features. So like Instagram, they have a rather new feature called checkout. And so it's an integration between Instagram and you having a store somewhere else. So like Kamama Beadwork having a store like on GoDaddy, right? And so you have your catalog on your own website. And then what you're able to do is you're able to link those and show those on Instagram. And then what somebody is able to do is they're able to come and they actually make the purchase on Instagram using Instagram software, and then they transmit that information to you so you can get the sale. And you say like why would you want to do that? Why wouldn't you just drive them to your GoDaddy store, right? Hey, they're already interested. Just drive them to GoDaddy and they'll buy. One of the things you're trying to do, and this is in all of business, right? In anything when you're selling, but e-commerce in particular, is you're trying to reduce friction, right? And so friction is basically anything that keeps a customer from moving forward with that purchase, right? So if the customer is going to, have to click on the information and then go to the website, right? They may maybe the website doesn't load. Maybe the website, they have slow internet. It takes a long time to load. Maybe they click on it and they go back and are reading something else and they totally forget that they clicked on it, right? All of those things are friction that keep the transaction from happening. That's one of the things why we see in a lot of e-commerce platforms where they want you to save your credit card. Yeah, they make it seem like it's a benefit to you, but really, what they're doing there is they're trying to reduce that friction. If your credit card is already saved, all you got to do is hit just keep clicking through, boom, and you've bought, right? Whereas if you have to now go and track down where your wallet or your purse is, you need to go find the card. Maybe in that time you start thinking, yeah, do I really need to get that purchase? Maybe you're too lazy to even go get your wallet, right? There's all kinds of different reasons why if you can't buy immediately, the transaction might not happen. And so that's what you want to do. You want to reduce that friction. And so if you're going to be selling on social media, be looking into some of these new types of platforms and new types of e-commerce features that they're offering, because you may not have to go and now in that situation in Instagram checkout, you do have to have another catalog, and all a catalog is right. Like if you had a Shopify store, that's your catalog of all your products, right? And you would just link those. But be looking at that, because that could be very valuable to you. Instead of driving them to your Shopify store, you can make those transactions right there in Instagram. And I'll just say that with Instagram checkout, setting up the shop is free. They're going to be charging they're going to be charging a transaction fee. I don't know what that is. I do know that they do have it waived, I believe, until June 2023. So they're this is more of a new feature. They're doing this introductory to get you in, and then of course, as with all these social media platforms, right? They want to get you hooked, and then they drop the hammer on you. So, all right, so let's move on. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time.
Mark, actually, do you mind if I say one thing about
Please, go ahead.
Taylor's business and the fact that she's utilizing Instagram, using Etsy, has her own website? One of the benefits to that is that it's extending her reach because, for instance, I'm not a big Instagram user. I've never purchased anything on Instagram. So, if Taylor had, obviously, like from this article in the New York Times on her, that's how she kind of gained notoriety, was through Instagram. But not everybody's on Instagram, so the fact that she's selling on Etsy and has her own website just gives other ways for her to reach customers. So that's just something else to think about and consider.
Okay. So, so moving on, now we're looking at some marketplaces, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Craigslist. Craigslist used to be big, especially in more urban areas, right? It was huge, ways to sell cars, ways to sell all kinds of things online. I think Facebook over the years, and not just Facebook Marketplace, I think is really taking a lot of their direct competition, but kind of buy sell groups. There was a lot of stuff that was on Craigslist, and a lot of that has now been able to be moved to social media, where it's people are already using social media, so they don't have to go to another website. You can be, it's much easier to be much more where you can put, graphics and images up. You could do that in Craigslist, but it's a little bit harder, doesn't look as nice. But the thought is just to kind of get you to know what the platform, the type of platforms are. So even if there's not a marketplace where you're going and setting up like Etsy, there's marketplaces like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and like with each of these platforms, it's free to post, right? So so you can go on, just post online, and if somebody contacts you, right, there's not those tools that you would have with a traditional marketplace or store software package, right? Where, the credit cards all integrated, somebody can just pay, you get the money automatically, right? A lot of this stuff is where it's going to be taken offline. Now, actually, and I'll just move ahead to Facebook Marketplace. They're trying to do that. They're putting those e-commerce features in to their marketplace to where you can pay with the credit cards. So you can start taking credit cards, whereas Craigslist was really something where it was local, right? It was somebody in your town, they're selling a car or they're selling a bicycle. You're going to negotiate on buying it, and then you're going to go and pick it up. And there's some things that Craigslist would be good for, where you can do it totally online. Things like digital products, like tickets. Somebody could sell you tickets. But one of the things is with Craigslist and being unregulated, it just got crazy, right? And there was lots of scammers. You never know what's going to happen, and that's one of the things you have to be thinking about where you're selling, because the I would say the reputation of the platform that you're selling on also dictates who the customers are going to be and what they perceive from you as a seller, right? So if you are selling on Craigslist and the only people that are on Craigslist are scammers, you're going to get that scammer label. People may not trust you if they do go there, but what's going to happen is just a lot of people are just going to stop using it. I haven't bought something off of Craigslist, gosh, maybe in a decade now, right? And so that's one of the things what happens. So you have to really be thinking about what's going on with the platform that I'm selling. And even that's even going to social media, right? And we may have time to get to this at the end and talking about marketing. And one of the things we talk about is target marketing. Where are your customers at? The people that are most likely to buy from you, are they on social media? If they are, you want to be on social media, but if they're somewhere else, you want to be there. And that's one of the keys to be thinking about. Whatever platform you're using, be thinking about where your customers are. And if they're no longer on that platform that you're selling, and they've moved on, maybe they've moved on, everybody's moved on to TikTok, then we all need to move on to TikTok. If everybody's moved from Craigslist now to Facebook Marketplace, we need to be on Facebook Marketplace, right? So be thinking about where your customers are. But Facebook Marketplace, one of the limiting things is it's all on the Facebook, right? And there's some people, I don't hear it as much, and I don't know if that's because the people that didn't like Facebook have moved on, but there was a lot of people that don't want to get a Facebook account, right? Or they want to get off of Facebook, stop using Facebook. And so, Facebook, what they're trying to do is keep you in their ecosystem. And so you have to have a Facebook, whereas with Craigslist, you don't have to have that. It tends to be locally focused, but they are trying to change that to where you can buy and sell things in different areas. There's a small percent fee. You can advertise. So like I said, they're trying to put those e-commerce features in there, very easy to use. They do have some tools, but, like I said, you're probably going to have limited reach, with Facebook Marketplace. But of course, if you're selling something that is very difficult to sell, maybe you don't want to ship it. You're selling like a giant hutch from your house, right? Something, gigantic. You're selling a water tank. You're not going to put that on eBay, right? Because you're not going to ship that. It's got to be local. So that's also be thinking about the product that you're selling. Where would customers go to try to find a product like that? I will say this because I was just going to say with cars, right? And that's tended to be where a lot of cars would be sold on Craigslist and now on Facebook Marketplace. But there are a lot of unique platforms to sell a car, and so like one of those might be Auto Trader, right? So be thinking: is there also a niche e-commerce platform where for whatever I want to sell, I could be going there and I'm going to be getting the people that I'm getting a lot of eyes on my product, and I'm getting people that would be interested buyers because they're coming there because they want the type of product that I'm selling. But here was just an example of, because we work with a lot of artists. Want to show you a native artist that's selling here on utilizing Facebook Marketplace, and they're selling this remotely, where they're selling this print, and then they'll even ship it to you, right? So there are ways to do traditional e-commerce, how we would think we'll be talking about in just a second, and you can utilize Facebook Marketplace as well to do that. Okay, so getting into some of the more, now we're looking more about the traditional marketplaces where you would build a store, right? And, we mentioned some of those up above earlier are things like, you had eBay, you have Amazon, right? Amazon, both they're a third-party marketplace. I think we've seen that where, it says sold and shipped by Amazon, but sometimes it says shipped by Amazon, but sold by somebody else, right? That's that Amazon third-party marketplace. Amazon Handmade, that's a competitor to Etsy. Walmart also has their third-party marketplace. So you're seeing a lot of these marketplaces now. And really what the marketplace is doing, as opposed to store software like Shopify, is they're bringing you customers. And so with Etsy, Etsy is going to bring you customers. Etsy is focused on handmade and vintage products. That's really what the Etsy platform is focused on. And because we work with so many native artists, that's why we focus on Etsy so much, because that's the most appropriate platform for them. Not that they can't sell on eBay, right? But the type of customer that's going to buy, art they're probably not going to go look on eBay, right? They're looking on eBay for used clothing. They're looking for eBay on, toys, collectible items, but things like art, things that are handmade, beaded jewelry, just jewelry in general. You're going to find those things on Etsy. So here's somebody that I think we're all familiar with. This is Lynn's store. And so these are things that that Lynn stores. So she has an Etsy. Lynn, would you like to say anything about Etsy?
Yeah. Why don't I just, and this wouldn't be just regarding Etsy, but really I have some like pros and cons that I'd like to share that really is applicable to any third-party marketplace. So I started my store last year was my first full year. I think I started it like 3 months in October of 2021. So anyway, last year was my first full year having my Etsy store. And one of the reasons why I chose Etsy, well, for one, I make handmade items. And like Mark just mentioned, Etsy is the world's largest marketplace for handmade items. So that was an easy decision. Thank you, Mark. So one of the other reasons I love Etsy is because it's where everybody's already going to find the kind of products that I create. So they're reaching a worldwide audience. In fact, I think now the last statistics I saw is that there's 49 million users. So that's people, utilizing Etsy, and it's in like 236 countries now, I think. But anyway, so all of the sales that I have made in my store have been to people that I never would have reached otherwise. I don't do any other marketing for my business. I don't have social media pages for my business. I don't go set up at art markets. I don't do any of that. This is the place where I sell, and this is what I stick to. So I'm not really doing any marketing. And so all of the sales that I got last year, I think I had 336 sales last year. But I also had 16,000 people visit my store. And there's no way that I could have done that. Like if I had a local shop where I live, no way I would have got 16,000 people, to come into my shop. So again, they're bringing all the customers. Everything I've sold have been to people I do not know, people I never would have reached otherwise. Even with my own marketing efforts, I wouldn't have been able to reach those people. There's been a lot of people that really complain about Etsy fees. And, here's the thing is that with any of these third-party marketplaces like Etsy, any of those, it's free to get on there and open your store. So the platform has to have a way in order to make money. And the way they do that is through things like listing fees. So whenever I list an item, I have to pay 20 cents. And then if someone buys that product from me, there is a transaction or a processing fee. I think the processing fee is like 6% now. And then of course, because they're paying with a credit card, there's the credit card fees. But I look at it this way. I'm not spending money on rent for a store. I'm not spending money on gas trying to drive to a powwow or an art market. So I'm saving a ton of money by selling on Etsy. And those fees are absolutely no problem to me. I think they're completely reasonable. And some of those fees you're going to have regardless anyway. I mean, if you do go to an art market and you're selling in person, if you're taking credit cards, you're going to have.
Oh, Lynn, I think you muted yourself.
Okay. What did I say last?
You're saying if you're going to an art market.
Oh, I said, some of these costs you're going to have regardless. Cause like if you're going to an art market and you accept credit cards, like you have a Square that you can put it on your phone and process a card, you're going to pay credit processing fees anyway. Or even if you're selling in, like Facebook Marketplace, you're going to have to ship those. So the shipping fees, are still going to be there. And I will say this about Etsy, that I buy all of my shipping labels through Etsy, and it's cheaper than going to the post office. So I actually save money there. Another good thing I like about Etsy, and a lot of third-party marketplaces do this, is they take care of the sales tax for me. So if someone buys one of my items and they live in a state where they have to pay sales tax, one, the customer pays the sales tax, not me. It doesn't come out of my money. But then Etsy Etsy remits all the sales taxes to my state on my behalf. So I don't have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. The only taxes I have to deal with at the end of the year are my normal income taxes, that I have to pay on the profit that I made in my business, and that's it. But I don't have to deal with the sales tax stuff. I don't have to send money into the state of Oklahoma or anywhere else. So that's a big plus for me. I would say if there were cons to being on Etsy, I would, on one hand, I'd be like, well, there's a lot of competition on Etsy. So whenever someone is typing in, like maybe they're looking for a beaded necklace and they just type in beaded necklace, it's obviously going to bring up a whole bunch of different sellers. And so you've really got to make yourself stand out in the crowd. And I would suggest that one thing that you can do is, try to find something that is unique to make. And try to make sure that your store looks good. I had some professional photography done because I mentioned earlier that Taylor, that bead artist that Mark was talking about earlier, she and I are in this cohort together. And as part of of participating in the cohort, we got a $1,000 photography grant. And so I was able to hire a photographer to take some pictures of my products. And as part of that, I also asked him, I'm like, well, I really, since I'm selling jewelry, I really need a model, to model my jewelry for me. And he goes, okay, I have the perfect person. And so he knows a young lady that's a member of my tribe, Nathalie Standing Cloud. And so he got her to model. But you can see, see there on the bottom left-hand side, I have a clay bead necklace, and I just have it on one of those black felt jewelry displays. And that's how I was showcasing my work was, I was just setting it on jewelry displays and taking pictures, and I thought that they were really good. But then once I hired a professional photographer to model, you can just see what a difference it really made. And that has just really increased the beauty of my store and made people more interested in the products where there's actual model wearing them. So I would say that, if you're going to have any kind of online store, you do need to pay attention to things like that because pictures are very important. So you need to invest whatever you need to make sure you have really good quality product photos. Some other cons, besides there being a lot of competition, is there is the opportunity, I guess it could happen anywhere really. If you do end up coming up with a unique item, someone else could copy that. But that's going to happen anywhere. I've honestly just been trying to think of, well, what really are cons? I would say probably the biggest con is I do know there is an Alaskan Native artist that makes products using seal fur. And she had an Etsy store, and Etsy will no longer allow her to sell her products on Etsy because it's from the seal. Even though she's a member of a federally recognized tribe, it's totally legal for her to harvest and sell seal fur it's not for the general public, and therefore Etsy just simply won't allow her to sell on their platform anymore. So that's probably the biggest con, is if you're selling something like that, that, you know, goes against federal regulations that most people have to adhere to, then Etsy is not going to make those concessions for you. So aside from, you know, making sure that you have to have a really nice looking store and good product photos, you also do, you know, you have to work at it. Even though I don't do a lot of marketing, well, I don't do any marketing. So I do have to go into my store and be active in it, because the way Etsy works and a lot of these other marketplace platforms, they have kind of a search engine optimization part to them. So if you create an Etsy store and you build it and you're like, okay, I built my Etsy store, I'm done, and you walk away from it, it's just going to sit there and it's not going to do anything, because Etsy knows that you're not being active in the store. So, you know, every couple of days or something, I'll go into my store, maybe I'll upload a new photo, kind of change around the product description, and that just helps keep my store pushing to the top, because Etsy can tell I'm an active seller. So, so that's the work that I have to put into it. And I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else I've missed. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Etsy. So,
Okay. Yeah, so so we have a number of different things here. Instead of going through all of these different marketplace platforms, I think that the overview, the overarching theme is what the marketplaces are, right? They bring you customers. So so that's a little bit different than what traditional store software is that we're going to talk about next. So that may be one benefit of why you want to be on a marketplace. All right, and of course, as Lynn mentioned, right, she doesn't pay rent in a brick and mortar store, right? So you think, hey, these folks are bringing us customers, so we have to pay a little bit more for that. Okay, so that's the first thing. The other thing that I would also mention is that they tend to be a little bit easier. Now, I will say that Shopify has made it super easy now, right? Because they're hosting their store software. So in a sense, Shopify has kind of leveled the playing field as far as the skill level that you need to set up a store, right? But traditionally, all you have to do is click through. They tell you where to put pictures up on a lot of these platforms. They tell you where to write your description. So it's a lot easier than if you were doing the work yourself, and definitely a lot easier than if you were installing that software and having to maintain it yourself. But one thing I do want to mention, and Lynn was just talking about this and going in and keeping the store active, is that with any of these stores, you can't set it and forget it. Even though we're talking about that the marketplace will bring you customers, that's not always the case. A lot of times people will post stuff and it'll just sit there for forever, right? So there still is a requirement for the the vendor, the seller, the artist, to make sure that they are marketing their store. Now, Lynn says she doesn't market the store, but in a sense, she is marketing the store because she's a member of the cohort, and Nest markets on their social media platform. Etsy has even featured the cohort, so they've marketed the platform. So even though Lynn's not doing it, she's a member of a group that's doing it for her, right? So that's all. So that's key, right? However it gets done, there needs to be marketing to your store, or else it's just going to get pushed to the bottom and nobody's ever going to find you, right? And we're probably not going to have a whole lot of time to talk about marketing. Maybe we'll just mention it for 5 minutes, but we'll talk about some of the strategies. I'll mention just some of the strategies about how you might market for a store, right? So Shopify and Shopify and other products like Shopify, right? So here's a picture of a Shopify store. So what is Shopify? So Shopify is an online store software, right? And you're building on their platform. And but the big difference between the marketplace and something like Shopify is that you can make it all pretty on Shopify, but you're going to have to bring your own customers. If you build your store, nobody will ever find you unless you find a way to market. At least with Etsy, there's a chance they'll find you, right? There's a chance they'll find you if you post on eBay. On Shopify, if you don't market, they're never going to find you. The one of the differences, though, between the two products is the fees, right? So with Etsy, Etsy's taking about 10% of each sale, right? Now 3% is going to credit cards. You're always going to have a credit card processing fee, no matter what platform you choose. You're always going to have that 3%. But with Lynn, she mentioned that Etsy is up to 6% now, and so with 6%. 6% is going to go to Etsy. So if you are selling a lot on Etsy, that money is going to be going to Etsy. Whereas Shopify, you pay a flat monthly fee. So if you're on Shopify and you're not selling any products, well, now you have this, and I believe they're $30 a month. And of course, you can get higher plans. You're going to be like, oh man, Shopify is so expensive. However, if you're selling a lot of products and you're selling especially high dollar items, and you're having thousands of dollars of sales every month, you're going to start saying, well, Shopify tends to be a bargain, especially if you can drive those people to your store and you're still getting the same amount of sales as you would on something like Etsy. So be thinking about that, right? How am I going to bring customers to my store? Do I have any social media? Do I have any following that's going to come over to my store? Can I drive people there? Because and also think of it as how we were talking about with Taylor and her store, and how it can be kind of an evolution. You may start with social media because that's the easiest, that's free, that's what you have right now. Then you move into a marketplace and you start getting customers, but you start getting such a following, and there's an expense there with the marketplace that now you can transition and start your own Shopify store and then be able to continue on, right? And so so pros with something like with Shopify, and this goes for all of these different store softwares, right? You have flexibility, you can do all kinds of stuff. Most of them will have integrations. They got shipping tools, marketing tools, right? Shopify understands if they just built the software and left you to your own devices, you would be in trouble. So they're trying to kind of help build that kind of ecosystem. Even though they're not bringing you the customers, they're trying to help you on the back end to run your e-commerce business, right? But like we mentioned many times, you need to generate traffic. Cost could be an issue, especially if you're not selling a lot of products, right? Obviously, if you're selling more, the cost becomes less and less of an issue. And then, of course, you're running your own platform essentially, even though Shopify is hosting it. So there could be a little bit more development work than would be on something like Etsy. So, and here's a store. I'll just put some of these because you may not be able to see the link. This is shenative.com. I'll throw that in there. So there's lots of native-owned businesses that are utilizing all of these platforms, and I just listed a couple others here, like Big Cartel. Big Cartel, they are focused on artists in particular. So artists and makers, as you can see here. So they have kind of a different niche. So one of the things that they're doing is they're a little bit cheaper than Shopify, especially for their free plan, because Shopify does not have a free plan. If you're going to go on Shopify, the minimum fee every month is $30. Currently, Shopify does have a deal where you pay $1 and you can get 3 months for free, or you get 3 months for that $1. So there are certain promotions they have like that. However, after that, you're going to be paying that $30 a month. Whereas Big Cartel, if you only have a couple items, Big Cartel may be a better place. And I would also mention this: you can list stuff on Shopify or Big Cartel and have your own website, your own store software, and also list that same product on Etsy, and some of the marketplace software. But what you want to do is you want to have great tracking, because if you sell on Etsy and that item's no longer available, you want to make sure that you immediately get in to your store, your store software, and take that out of inventory, right? Because you don't want to be double selling and all the problems that could cause, right? One of the cons with Big Cartel is the limit of 500 items, whereas Shopify, you can have gigantic stores. Big Cartel is just a more limited platform, but a little bit cheaper and focused for a lot of our clients is the right demographic. Here's just a feature of their costs. But what I wanted to show you here is this is Beyond Buckskin, and I'll type in their, give me 1 second. Can't do two things at once. Type in talk. I think that's the right thing. I apologize, my links didn't come through on those last two. Lynn, if you might be able to make those links at the HTTPS. But with Beyond Buckskin, this is a store. I believe they're in Minnesota, and I apologize if they're not. If they're in South Dakota, they're up there in the north central U.S. And what they do is they sell from a number of native artists, and so it's not just one person. It's actually a number of folks that are selling on this platform. But basically, it's it's all native artists, and they're using the Big Cartel platform to sell. And so you can see a lot of the functionality very similar. This store looks a lot like you wouldn't be able to really distinguish this store versus the Shopify store and things like that. So let's see. So one of the things that I mentioned is when you're doing this, you definitely want to do your cost comparison, right? What does it cost per month, right? And so here we actually take this cost compare. This is very important, right? Now we're getting into the business of your store, right? And so when you're looking at your cost comparison, right? What does it cost monthly? What does it cost per transaction? What does it cost for that credit card fee? And so if we take a $10 item sold, and let's say we sell 21 of those versus a $200 or $100 item, and we sell 2 of those versus a $1,000 item, right? You can see how we can break that down and what the costs are. And so you have to think about, what is my average sale going to be? What is my total monthly sales? You're just estimating. Now, you might have to get out there and experiment. And, you're on a platform for a while and you say, yeah, this is costing me too much, but what you do, you have that experience, and you can then go and run the numbers of what those same 3 months would have been on another platform, and make an informed decision on, do you want to switch or not, right? But what I do here, not necessarily to say, hey, choose this platform or choose this platform. What this is really something that you should be doing when you are choosing an e-commerce platform, or even when you're in an e-commerce platform. You've chosen one, you're running your business for a while. Be sure that you are going and always looking at your numbers, and you're always saying, okay, you're just verifying that you're on the right platform, and that moving to another one would not make both, financial sense just in the numbers and doing the accounting, but also thinking about those things about where your customers are coming from, and how difficult it would be able to reach those customers if you did move off of the platform. All right. So how do you decide? So now we're getting down to, okay, e-commerce sounds like it's right for me. How am I going to get on, how am I going to choose which platform? And we've mentioned this several times. So we're just reiterating what we've said. What type of product are you selling? Is there a niche e-commerce solution for that? right? Where are my customers going to be at? You know, how much inventory, right? Because that may determine based on cost, you know, which platform you choose. You know, who are you selling to, right? Is it, we didn't define these earlier, but B2B is business to business, B2C is business to consumer, and C2C is consumer to consumer, right? So if you're a consumer, you're not doing this all the time, but you want to sell a one-off item, right? That's going to lend going to something like Facebook Marketplace, right? But if you're selling to business, right, now you have to start looking at where do businesses go to buy things, right? I need to be on those more professional platforms. It's not to say a business won't buy something from Etsy, but that's probably not the first place they look. So you may want to choose a more appropriate platform because you're selling to those business customers. How much can you spend to reach customers, right? So now we're talking about advertising and different marketing strategies to bring customers to your store, on and on. This is all there. And of course, this is all in our PDF that you can download. So, Lynn, can I just roll on with marketing for these last 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll let you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, boss.
Yeah. Well, Lynn had some other stuff on shipping and everything. There's so much that we can talk about when we get into the e-commerce, ecosystem. So, so I think, thinking about marketing, because marketing is going to determine how, which platform you initially choose, right? And it may also determine, which platform you move to down the line, and if you ever are able to move to a different platform, So what I would say here, the best practice is to build a marketing plan. And so we put a marketing plan up here, and there's lots of different marketing plans. I downloaded one, but if you search marketing plans, you can find templates that you can go in and fill out. But one of the things that I would just say, actually I have one right here. I'm going to plug it here into the plug it in here to the box. But you know what? Most people aren't going to fill out a marketing plan. We've worked with enough entrepreneurs. Most people, we try to get them to do business planning, try to do marketing planning. Preparing a formal document, they don't want to do, right? They want to do something much quicker. So, okay, right. I've told you what your best practice is. All right, we'll move on. One thing you should be thinking about, though, is target market. We already mentioned it. And so definition, a particular group of consumers at which a product or service is aimed. Now, I always say this, that it does not mean that you won't sell to somebody that comes in and wants to buy from you, right? It's just when you're doing marketing, when you're doing advertising, you want to make sure that you are choosing the right, you're putting your marketing dollar or your marketing time in the right location, because we're only constrained in business and in life by two things, right? Time and money. So if you are limited with my time, right? And when we say time, all those social media posts that you're doing for free, that's taking your valuable time. Money, right? You're going to pay for Facebook ads, right? You're limited in how much money you spend, right? You're definitely not going to want to spend more in marketing than what you're making in the products that you sell, right? So you're definitely constrained there. So be thinking about, where are my customers? Who are my customers, right? That's the target market. Who are my customers? And then we can start talking about how we can go after those customers, right? And we could, there's lots that can go on in here, but what I just wanted to kind of finish up with is looking at channels, right? And be thinking about with any of these, especially when you move off of social media and you get into marketplace or store software, how can I utilize these different marketing channels to drive people to my store? So be thinking now as with social media, am I developing a following? Am I making interesting posts that I can then redirect people over to my store, right? Am I posting, consistently? Am I putting stuff up there about my work, right? So people can get an affinity, right? Affinity is just, a fancy word for, hey, they like me, right? They like what I do, right? So are you consistently building that affinity with those customers, right? Through social media, right? Do you create a website where when people go and search and they use Google, right? That and you maybe you have a unique name, that your website comes up first. And it doesn't have to be a very long website. It doesn't have to be multi-pages. It could be a one-page website, but it just has a bio about you, right? It may have a link to where your products are going to be, whether they're on that website, maybe they're being sold on Facebook, on a social media platform, maybe they're being sold on a marketplace, but those links are there. So it just gives another opportunity. Len is teaching a class here with the Native Learning Center next week on how to build a very simple website that's totally free of charge. You're using Google Sites. You do not have to pay money to build a website. It's not going to be the fanciest website. I'm not going to lie to you, right? But you can get there and you can get your own domain name, and you can get something up there on the web that looks nice and is your home on the web that you can redirect out to people, right? And you can own it forever, and all you're paying is the domain name registration, which can be $10 a year, right? So content marketing and SEO, maybe a little bit more advanced. That's one of the things I was also mentioning early about, if you're a native artist, do you want to learn all this stuff, right? So be thinking about that. Hey, I don't want to go in and I'll just define real quick. Content marketing is basically writing things like blogs, maybe, it's creating content, and through that content, it shows that you're an expert. It creates that affinity with your customer, right? And a lot of people, may be too busy to do, to create content, or they don't have the desire to do it. So be thinking about that, right? Because obviously when you move over to things like having your own website or creating your own Shopify store, you may want to be putting a blog there. So when people start searching, those keywords come up in that Google search, and your store is always being shown to people, right? And that's what content marketing can do. So it's definitely valuable. Paid advertising, right? Do you want to learn how to do paid advertising right? Do you want to spend money, right? Facebook ads, what we utilize Facebook ads. You may be at this webinar today because of Facebook ads, because we run Facebook ads for all of our trainings, because we know that if we just relied on the people on Facebook that like us, we're going to burn them out. They can't go to all of our trainings, right? So we're always trying to reach out to bring new people in. Do you want to do that? To bring people in to what you're selling and bring people into your store. And one of the things I would say, and I'll close with these last two because I think they're very valuable: email marketing and offline advertising, and they go together. And when I say offline advertising, I'm not talking about going and getting a billboard for people driving down the road, but thinking of these simple offline techniques. And one of the things I used to love, especially when I first got into business, there was a book. It's a gentleman named J. Conrad Levinson called Guerrilla Marketing. He's passed on now, and so it's not being produced anymore. But it was, hey, I didn't have any money, right? And so how do you have no money, right? And how do you still market, right? And that's what guerrilla marketing was all about. But that's what I think about, like, if you're going and you're setting up at a powwow and you have your booth there, or if you're at, if you're at Indian market, right, and you got your booth, or you're at another art market and you got your booth there, do you have a pad out there that people can sign up for your email newsletter? I know you probably don't you may not have an email newsletter, but you could be collecting those email addresses, right? And that could be very valuable. And you could see that's totally free of charge. You're already there. Just set your pad out, right? Maybe you say, hey, if you sign up on the list, you'll give them something. It does not have to be very valuable. Mary Beth puts her artwork on mugs. That mug probably costs her, let's say, maybe $5, right? She could say, hey, if you sign up to my email newsletter, I'm going to choose somebody today and I'm going to give them a mug at the end of the day, right? Very low cost, but you could get some very valuable email addresses. And I'll tell you what, email marketing still works. A lot of people have said it's dead, we're moving on. Believe me, email marketing still works. So you want to be collecting email addresses. And when I say offline advertising, do you still have a business card? Do you have a little postcard with your artwork if you're selling artwork, right? Not very expensive, but being able to always have your store website. Every time you see somebody, hey, here's a card, that's where my store is located, right? Because you can be driving those people that you meet in person online as well. So we have a lot of other stuff in the presentation that we obviously don't have time to get to, talking about like social proof is reviews, right? Making sure you're cultivating reviews, asking for reviews, responding to people that give you bad reviews, maybe even responding to people that give you good reviews. And then, of course, just like when we're talking about metrics and measuring and looking at, right, we want to always be looking at record keeping and making sure that what we're doing is profitable, right? Because the one thing we don't want to do, we don't want to be having an offline business, right? Let's say we're selling something, we're going to markets, we're selling, we got a brick and mortar store, we're selling offline. We want to move to e-commerce because we want to increase the revenue, but also the profitability of our business. And we actually have less profitability. We're losing money online. And so we always got to make sure that we're measuring what we're doing, both in traffic and those type of metrics, but also measuring the financial metrics as well, right? Making sure that, how much revenue we're getting, how much it's costing us to get that revenue, how much what we're producing is costing, and also looking at the time it takes. Those are also very valuable things. So my last thing is IDRS is here. Lynn talked a little bit about our organization, where IDRS stands for the Indian Dispute Resolution Services, right? But we run a project called IDRS Acorn Project, where we help small businesses, start, grow. And we're based out here in California, but we have folks all over the place. Like Lynn mentioned, she's in Oklahoma. We have people down in Arizona, and but we're here to help you remotely. Our website is nativebiz.org. We put information up there about trainings, previous webinars. We have links on there. There's a link on there to sign up for free technical assistance. We also have our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is just facebook.com/IDRS Acorn Project. I should have had it all of there. I'll put it in the chat box if you guys want it. And I always say, if we can't help you, because we don't know everything, we'll definitely work to find you some help, whether that's working through programs like SCORE, Service Corps Retired Executives, SBDC, Small Business Development Center. Maybe it's with your tribal CDFI. Wherever we can find help, we'll definitely work to do that. So I'm going to end it there. If you have any questions, we'll stay on. But we want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. And, good luck to you guys. We want to make sure that you can get set up on e-commerce and get going.
Thank you both very much for presenting today. We really appreciate it. I went ahead and already launched the survey for everyone. If you could just please let us know how Lynn and Mark did, and tell them what more you would like to know for next time, or if you would like some information for them to elaborate a little bit more on, please let us know. Certainly can look into doing a second part. We truly appreciate this webinar, and I know how important it is for a lot of people. So we'll absolutely look into seeing if we could do a part 2 to go over the rest of the information. Our next webinar is going to be on March 23rd. It is the Power of Native Energy, Financing Native District Energy, presented by Matthew Ferguson, Senior Advisor to the U.S. Department of Energy Loan Program Office. As always, registration is free, and that will be at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, and 11 a.m. Pacific. Feel free to access our recorded webinars and recordings on our website, www.nativelearningcenter.com. We have a Cathedra Webinars tab and a recorded webinar section. You can click on any one of the webinars that we have done for the past 18 months. Feel free to view them and share them with your friends and colleagues. Check out our upcoming events as well on our social media sites, such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Snapchat. We even have a podcast titled Hopathanga. You can find that on Simplecast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Once again, I want to thank Mark and Lynn for presenting today. We truly appreciate it, and it was an amazing presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this webinar today. We greatly appreciate you, and your feedback is valued and appreciated greatly. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you guys. So long.